Okay, hello everybody. I just noticed that number 4, the part 4, ended a little bit abruptly, so I'll just tune in here with part 5. So we're talking about the lovely Anjuna cops who would even bring their own dope to make sure that they would have a successful raid, you know. And they hid it during the raid, and then to so-called find it, and then they had a reason to arrest people and get money to bail them out. So there was constant extra flow was guaranteed for these keepers of the law. So Yuki said, listen, it will be hard for you to go away from here, but I will give you the finest dope I have from the Himalayas. If you keep it and enjoy it once back in Germany, you will be happy. It was such a nice, surprising gesture, and it was almost like saying goodbye to a newly found family, and that made it even harder to go. The bike barber I had organized had spoken about a 3/4-hour journey, so I worked out when we would have to leave Vagator to get to the airport in Dublin. My buffer time was gone, as I just needed the time to get everything sorted and say goodbye to everybody. I quickly popped in at my beloved host, Jeffrey, and his family, and then got on the waiting bike with my luggage between the driver and me. We only had a bit more than an hour to the departure, but with 3/4 of an hour drive, we should be fine. Dublin was a tiny airport, and I should check in within minutes. 3/4 of an hour later, we were just nearing Panjim, and I got concerned that we would make it in time. I asked the barber how long to the airport, and he said another half an hour. What? I realized that the 3/4 hour travel time he told me at first referred to going to Panjim, where he was stationed, but not to the airport where I needed to go. I was terrified and asked him to speed up as much as possible. When we finally got to the outskirts of the airport, I heard that roaring above us, and there it was, my plane. The only one going to Bombay on that day. I jumped off the bike, ran into the airport, but they only laughed, saying, come back tomorrow. Tomorrow, other flight. With me having missed the flight to Bombay, I also missed my flight to Germany, which was scheduled for the next day. I knew that there was only one flight per week to Munich with this airline. So that meant I would be stuck in Bombay for a whole week till I could get the next possible flight to Munich. That was great news. With my last rupees, I managed to get back to Panjim, where I got a room for the night. That was it then. Not 1 rupee left for the next day. How would I get up to Bombay? I had not a penny to myself. However, I got a bit of luggage, 10 tapes I had all recorded either from Michael's or from live parties, my Sony double-deck Walkman, and a sleeping bag. So I would sell some of my stuff to get the cash for a train journey to Bombay. There I had to rearrange my main flight to Germany. Luckily, in those days, you got a replacement flight for free. No extra charge if you missed your flight the first time. Any further postponements of flights would have cost extra. Just before I set off the next morning to sell my stuff, I remembered that I had asked my dad to send me some money. Maybe it has arrived in the meantime. I looked for a branch of Bank of India and went in. How big is the chance to walk into an Indian bank, which I never had entered before, and ask if a money transfer for Mr. Henry Kerber had arrived from Germany? Usually the Indian banks would always delay any incoming foreign money transfers to make some interest profit. Thus it was a nightmare to get money sent from abroad. Often people had to wait for days on end to finally receive their transfers. When entering the bank, I thought they must think I'm crazy, but instead they said, yes, there is a money deposit for Mr. Kerber from the German bank, waiting to be picked up. I was jumping with joy. Wow, I can't believe my luck. All problems solved. I was so pleased that I invited all the staff for cool drinks. $100 had just arrived and were handed to me upon showing my passport and filling in some paperwork. Wow. I had plenty of cash now to go and even stay in Bombay for the following week, till my next plane would leave a week on Wednesday. I got the flight to Bombay, put my luggage into a locker, and walked off to Café Leopold, the foreigner and hippie joint downtown Bombay. The best cafe with the best choice of Indian and European food mixed I've ever come across. Have you ever walked the streets of Bombay? In the morning, I could not believe my eyes. Rows of Indian men and boys would sit one beside the other in hockey position at the curb of the pavement where they just had got up from a night of sleep, lying on nothing else but a piece of newspaper and doing their business, probably using the newspaper they had just slept on to clean themselves. That is Indian recycle for you. I was shocked as to how low people's life qualities had sunk here, and yet they seemed to just get on with it. It was truly a different world for me. However, I was getting really hungry now and could not resist treating myself with a proper breakfast and then pondering over what I would do for the next 7 days here in Bombay. Just outside the cafe shop, a mobile Indian shoemaker had set up his stall, and having good money in the pocket, I got him to fix my American cowboy boots. To keep an eye on him, I chose a table at the window. The breakfast was delicious and only interrupted by me checking that the shoemaker was still there. Once again, I glanced outside and suddenly saw this Western guy coming along the road. Hold on. I thought, I know this guy. Who is coming along the road here? I couldn't believe it. It was Luigi from Goa. I shouted his name and went outside to greet him. He looked rough, and upon hearing that he had been sharing the pavements of Bombay for 3 days with the beggars as he ran out of money, I straight away invited him to a decent breakfast, which he gladly accepted. He told me that he was expecting a cash transfer from Switzerland, but it would possibly still take several days to arrive. I told him that I had missed my plane and had to wait for the next connecting flight to Munich in a week's time. But the good thing was that I still had about $70 left for my dad's transfer. Let's go a bit closer here. So, we both were kind of stuck here in Bombay. While Luigi was digging in, I told him about some of the recordings I got done whilst in Goa. I had my double Walkman with me as well as the tapes. It was funny when Luigi put the headphones on, as he straight away got into the party mood and loudly expressed his delight regarding the hot tracks I had recorded. People started to look in our direction, but we didn't care and indulged in the music blasting in the headphones. Then one of us remembered that there was talk in Goa that this year would be the big Mela on, the Kumb Mela, and some of the freaks considered going there. We recollected what was said and asked folk around in the cafe when exactly the Mela was on, and to our excitement got confirmed that it was on right now. People are traveling there from all over India. They would expect about 2 million visitors. Luigi and I looked at each other. Why should we not go there, rather than hanging around for a week in Bombay? I said to him, let's check out the cost for the train tickets and see how long it would take. If my cash would be enough for the both of us, we could just go. Total excitement was in the air. Luigi had regained strength, and he thought of traveling to the Himalayas, enthralled us even more than the great songs we shared from the parties a few weeks ago. We left Café Leopold and searched for the Bombay Central Station. There we got 2 tickets to Haridwar. It was good that Luigi spoke a few words of Hindi, as even with our English we were struggling to make clear where we wanted to go. We had a couple of hours before departure, and got some vitamins and other stuff which would be handy for a long journey on an Indian train. I went to the locker station, got some clothes out, and locked the rest of my luggage away for a week. Back at the central station, we couldn't trust our eyes. The platform our train was supposed to leave from was completely overcrowded with thousands of Indians, monks, sadhus, families with their livestock, big balls of luggage, etc., etc. We didn't get a reservation anymore, so we had to see if we could get a seat. The train rolled in and the masses got excited. As soon as it stopped, a mad rush to the wagon doors started, and almost fighting scenes were displayed in front of our dumbfounded eyes. "We'll never get in there," were both our thoughts. But then we calculated, if we don't get this train, we would not be back in time for my flight. 2 days journey there, 1.5 day stay there, 2 days to travel back. So the battle began, and eventually we managed to get into one wagon. But all the seats were taken, and not only that, but all the floor space between the seats and the hallway was taken as well. People either sat on the floor or stood. Not a square foot space was left free. I discovered that somebody didn't use their luggage compartment above their heads. And that was it. We climbed for our way through and finally took hold of the 2 luggage shelves above all the Indians. There were no white people apart from us, and we were the prime topic of everybody's conversation. Almost 40 hours on this train ahead of us. At night, we would use our belts to secure us onto the luggage frame to not fall down, if we would turn round while sleeping. The worst was when we needed the restroom. Luigi faced the situation at first. He said he might have to pee out the window, as he saw no way to get to the toilet at the end of the wagon. I said I rather prefer the hustle to get there than exposing myself in front of the Indians. So I started to climb above the heads of the tightly packed Indians all the way along through the corridor from one frame to the next till I got to the toilet. There I tried to get down to the floor near the door. Then I had to wait till it became vacant. At longer stops, we would try to get outside to move our legs and get some fresh air. The heat was almost unbearable. Blue sky with a merciless burning sun hour after hour. The only relief for our thirst was a chai man shouting, "Chai, chai, chai." Old, weathered Indians who would walk along the train at every station and offer a cup of tea for as little as 1 to 2 rupees. And this price would even include the clay pot or cup, which was not even given back but thrown out the windows. Hour after hour, the train would cross through the vast Indian subcontinent, heading for the biggest mountains in the world, the Himalayas. I started to enjoy the rhythmic sound which was coming from the huge old diesel locomotive, which pulled the endlessly long train through the heat. If it wasn't for the colorful scenery and the endless variations of Indian life survival style, which was unfolding along the train tracks in front of our insatiable eyes, I would have called the journey a torture. We tried to communicate with the locals as much as possible, but here it was a different ballgame. In Goa, most Indians spoke English, whereas here on the train, not everybody was able to communicate with us via words. Often it had to be hands and feet, but that killed time. Finally, after almost 2 days of spending in a luggage compartment directly under the ceiling of a totally overcrowded train, we arrived in Haridwar. As quickly as the Indians had stormed the train in Bombay, as speedy they were when pouring out on the platform and disappearing into the town. We were basically the last ones walking down the platform and following the masses, as we didn't have a clue as to where to go anyway. Sweaty and exhausted, we walked through the colorful streets of this little town and finally came to a big river where already hundreds of people crowded the riverbanks. Families with their kids enjoyed the cool water, Indian women washing their clothes, others trying to do business on the steps which led into the water. An old lady sat there with her own elephant, which was just perfectly normal, and nobody really bothered. Seeing the Indian kids enjoy the cool water, we knew what would be the best treat for our sweaty, exhausted bodies: a dive into this river. We looked for a trustworthy-looking family and asked them if we could store our few belongings beside theirs, and they happily offered their care. With a big header, we jumped into the water, and all I remember is that it was the most amazing sensation I ever encountered when jumping into any sort of water. The water was so bubbly and refreshing. It felt like jumping into a pool of chilled champagne. Enjoying the refreshing stimulation of my skin all along my body, I tried to stay under the water surface, and when finally coming back up to the surface, I suddenly felt the incredible current and speed of the river. We swam to the shore and just managed to get out of the water, climbing up the stairs when we realized that we had been washed down about 30 to 40 meters in this powerful current. We had to walk back to our stored stuff, and our amazement grew when realizing the distance we had moved in the water. All the exhaustion was gone. We were fit as anything and straight away jumped in again, as it was too good a feeling, worth repeating several times. Inspired by this mind-blowing, refreshing experience, we decided to explore the area a bit more. Due to the heat, our clothes would dry quickly while walking along the riverbanks. Whereas the one side of the river was made up by the town of Haridwar, with its countless little roads and lanes, full of shops and the usual residential buildings, the other side of the river was more or less a vast plain, covered with hundreds and thousands of mainly white and orange tents, divided by several dirt roads which led into all directions, tents as far as the eye could see. Several bridges connecting the tent city with the main town, and there were masses of people, Indian monks and sadhus, Buddhists in their orange clothing, and normal Indians, but hardly any white people. Food shops and drink shops, craft stalls, spiritual entertainment, and counter tents were lined up row after row, street after street. Sadhus and ascets sitting on their blankets, displaying their particular meditation, yoga position, and self-chastisement. Sadhus were with white paint over the whole body, just a little tanga string to cover their manhood, dreadlocks, grimly painted faces, sadhus in painful exercises like standing on one leg for the last 15 years. I'm sure there were also sadhus sitting on the famous nail boards, which we knew in the West as a stereotype of an Indian fakir. Here it was reality and part of a spiritual experience of those who searched for higher consciousness. It was a spiritual market, a fair of unseen dimension, the Eastern way of life, without any limitations or restrictions of any sort. Some of the sadhus and their exercises appeared to be rather frightening, showing clear indications that supernatural powers or links must have been involved. Luigi and I tumbled through the streets from one tent to the other, struggling to trust our eyes as to what we would see. But not only were our eyes on almost overload, but our ears were struggling to cope with the multi-mix of sounds that were blasting from thousands of not only voices but trumpets like speakers, which were literally mounted everywhere outside the tents, above shops, on masts, everywhere. It all melted together to one mighty sound which engulfed the whole place. Walking down of the main road, I suddenly stopped and looked around. I realized that the whole Kumb Mela place and Haridwar, the town, were surrounded by hills and kind of enclosed by them. Never have I heard anything amazing like this sound mix, this collection of 2 million people talking and all their loudspeakers shouting melted together in this natural resonance body of this valley to one supernatural sound, better than the best songs in Goa. While I stopped and lapped up what human ears could hear at best, I remembered that I had my double tape deck Walkman with me, as well as a tiny stereo microphone, and that I could actually record the sound. As I had done live recordings on the parties and captured some of the rarest, most amazing dance tracks never ever heard anywhere in Europe's nightclub scene, I could top this up by this present sound experience, which was simply beyond any description. Now I recalled that the Goa freaks and DJs would keep their sound and tracks for themselves and not easily share it with anybody. It was a sort of in thing, being part of the scene, insider thing. Marita only would lend me the 2 tapes because she knew me from Goa. It was held precious and almost secretive amongst the Goa hippies. I understood this fully and almost acquired a certain respect with this exclusive underground music. But now, experiencing an even more unique sound, I suddenly realized that it would be almost like desecrating it if I tried to take this sound with me, stealing it away from this unique place by recording it on a trivial magnet tape. I realized I would rather not have this sound recorded and thus making in some way a merchandise of it, but rather absorb it with all my ears could do at that very present moment and leave it untouched, allowing no greed to profane it. Still marveling if I did the right thing, as I knew I would never again hear this awesome feast for the ears again. I walked on in a daze, catching up with Luigi. Then came the smells of food and spices and incenses of all sorts, smelling incense sticks on every corner, which created their own distinct atmosphere. Our senses were flooded beyond anything we had ever experienced before. At some point, we got back to the river. Moving along with the constant flow of masses of people, I could not work out what was going on with all these sadhus and monks, as well as the young Indian women who seemed to be at the service of these spiritual adventurers. The bridges could hardly be recognized, as so many people were crowding them. Then, looking over the river to the other shore, with its distinct set of stone stairs leading into the water, I saw a white European face, maybe 50 to 100 meters away. Wow, we were not the only ones in the middle of this Asian multi-mix of people. Somehow I wished to meet this European, as it would be interesting to hear of his impressions, as we needed some input, explanation as to what on earth was going on here. 20 minutes later, this very guy crossed our path. I knew it was him, as he was the only other non-Asian face we had seen in the midst of all the thousands of people. He turned out to be American, and he was happy to meet us, as he too felt a bit lonely in this strange crowd. We talked for a while, and then, with a smile on his face, he asked us if we'd like to enjoy some free acids he'd like to treat us with. We couldn't believe our luck. Sure, man, that would be awesome. He advised us to choose one of the food places we'd like to order a meal, throw the acid in, and enjoy the meal. That's what we did. And already during the meal, we felt the acid taking off. We were highly tripping when leaving the place, well fed and satisfied in our tummies, just about being able to still walk around. But now all the flooding in impressions intensified with the acceleration power of the LSD trip. We walked on and virtually felt part of the whole thing. We would enter tents and see what the monks had to offer. It was a mixture of spiritual wisdom and mechanical trickeries. But instead of being impressed, we somehow had now the mental power to interfere and confuse, even stop the mechanical displays the monks were so proud of. People realized something was strange about us, but we found it funny. There were still miles of stalls to explore and crazy stuff to discover, and we just went for it, hungry for more. At some point, we came onto one of the main roads of this tent city. It was at least 20 meters wide and seemed endlessly long. Suddenly we heard this siren roaring in the far distance, and people started to run towards us. Somebody shouted, "They are spraying again against TBC. Get away from here." We didn't know what was going on, but the siren got louder and louder, and then we saw this pickup car coming along the main road, pulling behind him this huge cloud of anti-TBC smoke gas, as wide as the whole 10th Street and up into the sky at least 10, 15 meters. The siren being installed on top of the pickup almost killed our ears, so we just started to run and try to escape the cloud by diving into one of the side roads. There was this other European guy who raved on as to how much dangerous this gas was itself, never minding the epidemic dangers of such a huge crowd of people gathered in such a dense, chaotic tent city without sufficient sanitary equipment. We couldn't be bothered and just went on to enjoy the madness of the place. Somebody invited us to come along with him, and at first we contemplated to do so we followed, but then both Luigi and I felt it was not right, and just in time we got out of this dodgy situation. Relieved, we moved on. I still trying to find a certain area where we were supposed to meet some of the Goa freaks, so we walked along a small path going parallel to a river. We were about to turn right when somebody far away waved to us. We thought to check it out and continued to go along that small path, which somehow was not so crowded anymore. After about 70 to 100 meters, we got to this little group of sadhus, of whom one of them had waved to us. The place where they had made themselves comfortable was very special, as it was at the end of a little peninsula between two arms of the same river. Virtually surrounded by water and whitewashed stones, the place radiated such a peacefulness. It was awesome. Coming closer, I could not believe my eyes. This young sadhu who had waved to us indicated with his hand that we should sit down beside him. Never have I seen such a beautiful human face as this man had. He looked majestic, like a king, authoritative like a noble American Indian chief captain, and yet radiated such meekness and gentleness that we felt instantly absolutely safe. Both of us realized these guys were not like the commercial common sadhus out there in the tent city. They were truly of another class. So I think so far till here, I don't want to make it too long. Next time it goes on with a few crazy things on this Kumb Mela, which was really cool, unforgettable. Okay, all the best, time out.